Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Conversion Podcast. As usual, it's Brandon, Matt, and Connor. And on today's episode, we have an exciting guest. Father Ian's on. He talked about some interesting things from the MetaCatholic world. We rubbed shoulders with him at the Catholic Crypto Conference, and we were able to have him on the episode today to kind of talk about the projects that he's doing in VR and with Faith Games and MetaCatholic. Really cool stuff. The game that's coming out, it's going to be a game featuring Blessed Carlos Acutis, who we all got socks of at the conference. And we should definitely do an episode in the future where we can kind of talk about Blessed Carlos Acutis's life more, because it's a really incredible story in terms of evangelization on the internet. But yeah, it was a great episode. I think we had a good conversation. I don't know what you guys thought of the conversation, but I found it to be something different and intriguing in comparison to what we've been having previously.
I think any priest you talk to just brings a different perspective on everything. So it was great
Yeah,
to,
true.
yeah, great to hear what he's thinking about and what he's doing.
No, he's got some edge to him too, which I like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good having probably a young priest on too, because he's very aware of what's
Yeah.
happening online, and not just in the crypto space, but on the online space. So I think it was an interesting conversation as well for that reason.
Very tuned into the culture and how to approach it from an evangelist standpoint, and how to evangelize it. He was on TikTok pretty early, which is incredible, because I remember seeing the ads for TikTok on Snapchat when TikTok was like first in its infancy stages, and I was like, who would go on that stupid app? Like, and then COVID happened, and I guess I was the one that was stupid for not being on it. So live and learn. Learn and
It
live.
was really weird. And he mentioned in the episode, that like he talked to like the college students before it got popular with them. I was teaching high school at the time when TikTok was getting popular, and it was like even from one grade to the next, like all the juniors and seniors like did not use TikTok. They all used Instagram and Snapchat, and then all the freshmen and sophomores used TikTok. It was so weird, like at the same time. It just very funny
Oh,
how
so you saw the cultural
like the
divide in
generational, yeah.
that's
But
that's interesting, man.
anyway, more modern stuff. What's or contemporary, if you will? What's happening in the news?
I want to,
Uh,
Connor, can we get started with the Asia crypto stuff?
yeah, I was going to say that was probably
That's
the best place to
fascinating.
start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because actually today, so we're recording this June 1st. The podcast is going to go live later, but today is when officially Hong Kong is open to retail, I guess, trade of cryptocurrencies. So interesting news there. But here's the thing. So a lot of people said, this was going to obviously cause a bull run in the market because you're going to have all this money pouring in from the Asian market. Not necessarily true, because what happened today is not that Asian people are getting on. Sorry, Asian people, Chinese is getting onboarded to crypto because. All right. So today they're opening up applications for companies that are going to begin to enter into the crypto market and begin to allow people in Hong Kong to trade cryptocurrency, but they're not trading yet. So we're not seeing that money enter into the market right now.
It will. It's just
It
wait.
will.
Yeah. I saw there was a group that looked like they were going to launch a USD stable coin. I don't know if you guys saw that. Like that was
Yeah.
very new.
Yeah.
I saw
Well,
some headlines.
that's another interesting thing is, so it's not all coins. Hong Kong is still regulating which ones. It's the major cap, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and there's some other requirements as well. Like I guess the people have to prove that they have understanding of these, these coins. I guess they don't want their citizens getting scammed on, low cap or things they don't understand what they're using. The other thing is they're not going to allow people to trade stable coins until there is a Hong Kong approved stable coin. So that's what you see. That's probably what you saw on the timeline, is that there's a few different people in discussions right now about that.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool stuff. Brandon, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I'm interested what this is going to look like, because we've kind of hit a weird, I don't even know if it's fair to say, like a stabilization point with the total crypto market things have kind of gone a little flat, and I'm not like a chart reading expert here or analyst by any stretch, but I'll be interested to see what some extra liquidity or usage will bring to the market from an exchange standpoint, and how that's going to greater impact the global market, or if that's just going to more so positively affect the Asian crypto market, so to speak. Because we saw what happened in Nigeria with, was that Nigeria with the Bitcoin, right?
Yeah,
It went to
yeah.
60K.
It was
Yeah, so
Uganda? Was it Uganda or Nigeria?
it was
Nigeria,
Nigeria, I
because they were
think.
going
Oh,
to
I
the
think
okay.
it
All
was
right.
CBDC. Yeah,
Nigeria. Yeah,
yeah,
no, I don't think it was Uganda. I don't think Uganda would let it get to that point there. But Nigeria, they've been having currency issues for a while, and that Bitcoin got to 60K, because there was no accessibility to the banking system. In Hong Kong, they're still going to have accessibility to the banking system,
Oh yeah.
because that's like Asia's finance capital. That's one of the finance hubs of the entire world, economically speaking. So I don't think it's going to definitely bode well, but I don't think it's going to necessarily be like this big crypto boom that people are anticipating, just because there are enough on and off ramps accordingly, for people to kind of exchange,
Yeah.
in the manner that we would want to be accustomed to. But also at the same time, do we want to be accustomed to that? Because that's a very highly centralized way of onboarding to crypto too. So it's definitely not decentralized, and I don't think it will be decentralized, knowing how China operates. So that's kind of my general consensus. Kind of looking at this, I'm excited that China is able to get back into crypto, because they've kind of had they've handcuffed it.
They had a
Proverbially.
hiatus. I know when I started
Yeah,
like 2 years ago, everybody was like, the crypto industry is in China, and they were complaining about the US regulations and how all of our business is going to be offshoring to China because China is so open to crypto.
yeah.
And then since then, obviously, China has closed to a lot of crypto opportunities. And
Well,
now they're just
China's the
starting to
reason
open
why
up
we
again.
have the Bitcoin forks, as we found out when we were doing the fork episode. So, like,
The Bitcoin miners.
so there is a serious interest in crypto and in China.
Yeah.
I guess it just depends on what is it going to look like from a regulatory standpoint. What is
Yeah.
the CCP and G going to do? And that's something that I'm interested in terms of what this means for the Chinese economy and the entire crypto climate as a whole.
I mean, I'll just say the last thing on this point. But this is just a continuation of what we've been talking about. This is China. This is Russia looking to end dependency on the dollar and to open up, new avenues of economic transaction. So that's why I see that they're opening up and being more friendly to crypto. Well, while unfortunately here in the U.S. will seem to be becoming less friendly. Let's hope that's not the case for long.
We
yeah. We'll
just
see.
we just add an additional 1% to the total what government's able to spend. Hey, but it's okay, because government's going to grow more slowly by growing an additional percent, according to our Speaker of the House. It's more slowly, but still
What a
growing.
what a mess.
So what's going on with this Ordinals thing, Matt? I imagine you added
Oh,
that.
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just a big deal. I think it was in the last week that they passed 10 million inscriptions. So every time you create an ordinal, whether it's a, you know, uh, you put a image file or ordinal, you're just inscribing anything into a Satoshi. So a lot of it now is, I don't remember if we talked about BRC20, which is just hilarious, right? It's because it's not ERC20, it's not on chain, like it's some off chain consensus of what the things mean. Real funny, but so there's a lot of token trading now going on Bitcoin, and people minting tokens and things like that. So the ordinals, they're not minting tokens, they're inscribing ordinals. So they're denominating, this is Satoshi number, 5,600,000, whatever, and so they passed 10 million Satoshi. So they're counting up. They passed 10 million. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, not huge to talk about it. It's a, it's a, milestone. I think I mentioned before when they had done maybe 100K in a real short amount of time, or 1 million in a real short amount of time. And so, anyway, just interesting to see more building, more development, and people
more
doing
continued
stuff
growth on the
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin network. I mean, I was just in a Twitter space today briefly where there's still arguments going on about this. So it's but actually the argument, the Twitter space I was in was talking specifically about Ethereum versus Bitcoin and how this is changing that dynamic. So yeah, it's just interesting conversations. But from my understanding, I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners who are not happy to see this. But obviously there's demand for it. 10 million inscriptions. So
10 million, yeah. I'm following all the Bitcoiners who like to see it, I guess, and so it's funny to see that dynamic too. The way that they trash the maxi viewpoint. It's a funny conversation going on. But yeah, there's other stuff going on Bitcoin as well, but I'm not. We'll save it for another episode. I'm not well read enough on it.
Sure.
Other.
I think we can probably just go ahead and jump to the podcast episode. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, let's do it. It's a great conversation with Father Ian from MetaCatholic or Faith Games. He'll explain a little bit more about what he does and discussion. So we hope you all enjoy it.
All right, we are so grateful to have Father Ian with us. Father Ian is the creative advisor or director, maybe we'll call it, of MetaCatholic, which has recently merged with Faith Games Inc. Not Faith Games Inc. Yeah. And so, yeah, building VR Catholic games. So we are just thrilled to have him. And maybe just to start off, either beginning or end of the episode. So we'll start off. If people want to find you on social media or online anywhere, like where can they find you?
Yeah, the big thing would be is if you just search my name, Father Ian VanHeusen, I am the easiest person to find online. I actually think my cell phone is available on the internet. So I mean, I am the easiest person to find online. There's really nobody else with that name, and wow. And you can actually find things going way back on me. But so I'm the only person with that name I know of in the world right now. Definitely the only one in Google. MetaCatholic, we haven't been posting to as a while recently because we've been focusing on the Carlos Acutis game, which you'll get more of that through Faith Games. I'll have to get their handles eventually. Sorry, now this is like creating some to-do lists. What's my official title with Faith Games? Yeah. What are the handles so I can give that stuff out? We'll work that out by the next interview.
If I may interject, Father, don't give yourself a title. Titles pigeonhole you. Give yourself that room to breathe. But no, it does help to have role clarity. Makes everything work accordingly. So,
and we'll connect with you after and get those links and put them in the YouTube channel so people can
throw them in the description. Yeah, that is funny that you're the only one with that name because you'd think Matt Bagazinski. There's like 2 other Matt Bagazinskis that I know. So, it's impressive that you're the only one on Google with that name. So yeah, just to start off, what is MetaCatholic? How as a priest, how did you get involved in, VR, in, this company and now this merged company? I don't know. We're interested in the story.
Yeah, so it all started with a one-on-one that I was doing with a college student. So one of the things I do a lot of in my ministry is what I call one-on-ones. That can be philosophy, that can be theology, that can be spiritual directing, counseling, and a lot of times it all gets mixed together. So I don't just purely call it spiritual direction because with this student, we've actually been walking through St. Augustine's Confessions and talking about economics, philosophy, politics, just one-on-one. Well, one day he was telling me, this was about a month or so after the Meta announcement. I have to get the timeline straight in the coming years. But he was talking with me about a groundbreaking study in economics that was changing the field of economics, where economics was starting to look at, like the academic side of economics was looking at video games and video game ecosystems as a means of studying things like inflation, different economic interventions, because video game economies work in a similar way to real economies, almost identical. They have issues with inflation. And what he told me is that there's a groundbreaking study. I'll have to look up the name of it, and we could probably link it. Discovered that in this one particular video game, the video game currency was worth more than the Japanese yen. That it actually had, and this was before cryptos, this was before all of that. And that's when I finally understood digital currencies, digital economies. Now, I will also say I have a buddy that works, that used to work for Epic Games and with Fortnite. And so after this, I actually emailed Tim Sweeney a few times, and he was very gracious in answering my questions. But so I knew about things like Fortnite. My buddy had actually told me about what Fortnite was going to do before it became famous. Like, he's like, yeah, this is our idea for the game. I was a little doubtful. I'm a little, I realize now, don't ever be doubtful of these ideas anymore. Like, be open to it. And I was actually, I remember the first iteration of Fortnite before it became a battle royale and before it blew up. And I never really played video games, but my buddy worked for Epic Games. So the student told me about the economics. And my first thought was, man, we could build a chapel in these video games and people can make donations with their in-game currency to the chapel. And that could be a nice little revenue, right? I mean, I'm a diocesan priest, right? So we think in terms of that collection plate, man. You gotta so let's get a little piece of that action. Make a nice little chapel in World of Warcraft, and people can make donations. Well, then shortly after that, me and him started brainstorming. That's when I formed MetaCatholic informally, and we just started experimenting with stuff that we could do using the existing VR technology. And my goal with media was always to do things as cheap as possible because I have a very limited amount of money. So we were just trying to innovate. Long story short, I brought on Jason. We got into animation. And then we started partnering with Faith Games after the Catholic Crypto Conference, where we connected with them. And we started working on the first Catholic video game with Faith Games. Now, going back to it, what I really saw was the insight for me was that the video game technology would undergird VR, AR, and Web 3.0. Like, once I understood that intellectually, I was like, this is coming. No matter this, this is clearly coming. I think I was expecting that this last year there was going to be a lot more acceleration of Web 3.0 content in VR. I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't, and I have reasons why I think that's the case. But that's kind of the short answer.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I think, and I'm a little sorry. Now I got like three questions. So maybe first, the Carlo Acutis game, was that something that you were working on before? I know I saw, Faith Games and Crescete have been promoting that a lot. Was that a game they had been developing that now you're hopping into, or I don't know. I was curious.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was they were developing the idea for the Carlos Acutis game. I honestly, my buddy worked for Epic Games, and I have a lot of friends who are in the gaming industry. I didn't think I had the chops when I was pulling into the Catholic Crypto Conference, I was telling Jason, I was like, Jason, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to pay you in 2 months. Like, we were throwing a Hail Mary pass in the fourth quarter, and I was like, we were rolling into the Catholic Crypto Conference and Seek. In my mind, we were nobodies. Nobody had heard of us, and we just shined at both of those events. And what happens is Faith Games, they're a little bit more connected in the business world. They're in the New York City world. Carl, who's one of the main guys we work with, Carl and Eddie. Carl has a background working with Mike Bloomberg in New York City. So really, if it wasn't for them, we would have had to close up shop within like 2 weeks after the Seek event, where we kind of finalized that. Like, we were running on fumes. Initially, they were going to hire us as contractors, but it became clear in my role as a pastor and a priest that I couldn't manage the day-to-day of building a video game. So they basically brought on Jason, our main employee, and we kind of merged.
Okay, that's awesome. And then I am curious, and I want to let Connor and Brandon jump in as well. But the other thought you said, you were kind of disappointed that there wasn't as much, Web3 and AR VR development in the past year. What are your thoughts? I don't know if you've seen how Apple is now developing some, AR VR technologies. I've seen a lot of people say, that's gonna, when Apple does something, then everyone buys it. I don't know if you've got thoughts on that. whether or
Yeah,
not.
I mean, I think leaving that aside, I think one thing I found with Meta, Facebook, their investment and some of the projects they took on with Horizons is they weren't really that great. I mean, I spent time on them in VR. I mean, I'm not spending a lot of time in VR, but Spatial did an app that was a significantly more interesting experience at a fraction of the cost. And so throwing money at things is not necessarily going to create problems. We are in the moment with Web 3.0 is like Web 2.0. Think of Web 2.0 before Facebook, before MySpace, actually probably before MySpace, right? MySpace was when it really started to blow up. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys were old enough to remember that, but MySpace and Facebook, that's when it really Web 2.0 really started to take off. Amazon, things like that. And we're also before the iPhone. The iPhone kind of changed everything.
Yeah.
So the question is, what will be in Web 3.0 the equivalent of Facebook, MySpace, and the iPhone? And as soon as somebody can come out with a pair of glasses that you can put in your pocket or some kind of device that you can easily put in your pocket and pull out and have an AR, VR and switch back and forth, that's going to be kind of the game changer in my mind.
I think that makes sense. I mean, just talking with friends and whatnot, some people aren't really buying into the whole metaverse idea because it's like, oh, you need these giant goggles and you look stupid wearing them, you know. But I don't think people realize that it is going to be like that. It's going to be like these, you know, just like sunglasses, really, something that you just pop on your eyes, and it's going to enhance, you know, normal day-to-day experiences. I've even seen stuff about like some people are doing like extended desks for like office work, so you can have multiple monitors, but it's all a VR experience. You know, especially if you're in like situations where you have like limited desk space or whatnot. I mean, that's extremely useful for like a whole host of things, not just gaming, you know, which I think is what we associate VR experiences with now, as gaming and entertainment and whatnot. But no, like this is really going to change the way we interact with the internet. So it's interesting because like the way I look at it with Web3, it doesn't naturally lend itself to you know, the needs of metaverse. And maybe you can speak a little bit more to this, Father. But just with needing these like massive amounts of computing power and whatnot, there's some limitations with blockchain, obviously, because blockchains are more focused on security. Sometimes using centralized servers can speed up that process and make things simpler. But I think where you start to see these synergies kind of happen is just thinking, okay, what really at its core is Web3? Well, it's the next level of the internet. So if we've had Web 2 and we're moving to this new internet, what is that going to look like? Well, obviously, it's probably going to look like some sort of metaverse and you know, virtual reality use cases for the internet. So, like, what are the synergies there with what Web3 in the blockchain and the crypto space is doing versus, you know, what the metaverse is doing, and like where do we see kind of these two ideas kind of melding, in your view, at least?
I think the big thing, the main problem that hit like a storm this year is going to be authentication. Authentication of what you're seeing. Is what you're seeing in a video real? How do you trace it? How do you hold accountability? I know one of the things that Crescente is working on, I think this is public. Forgive me, Carl and Eddie, if it's not. We do talk about trying not to talk. There's certain things.
The alpha, we're getting the alpha right here. You know?
Yeah, within the, you know, within the mutual NDAs. They talk about authentication is one of the things they're working on with Crescente, so that when you're in a digital space, you can't pretend to be somebody else. I think the authentication of digital images, digital goods, photos, because AI is going to advance. I mean, we've already seen it, how much it's advanced in a year. I don't think people who realized how quickly Midjourney has been progressing. I mean, it's been phenomenal to watch. I think that'll continue to happen. A lot of the people I'm working with, I mean, the great thing about the people I'm working with, not just with Faith Games, but also all the independent contractors, is everybody's just on board using these things and leveraging these new technologies, and they're able to do so much. So I think the blockchain, all that will cause digital assets to have a more stable reality. I think that's the way I've put it. one thing that's hard to wrap your mind around when you're like an older generation like mine or a little bit older, we're used to digital experiences kind of being pixels on a screen. So, you think of a television, it projects it on there, but the thing that you're seeing it's a projection, but it's not a digital thing, like a digital. And that's kind of what blockchain does. And some of these these digital assets, it makes them more stable things. I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's like photocopies and things like that versus the original. I think that and with smart tracks and all these contracts with all these different technologies, it'll make digital assets more stable. With Web 3.0, it's already really emerging in 101 ways. It's just nobody's putting it all together, because I think a lot of people who are using these technologies don't understand that underneath it is the same basic concept of a video game engine, basically. Like Unity, Unreal, like that's basically the underlying structure. So a good example, have you seen Matterport, what they're doing with real estate? Have any of you guys seen that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, look it up. Matterport right now, they sell a commercial device. We did it for like a couple $100. They take a 3D scan of your building, make a 3D model, and you have a virtual tour, and you can use a VR headset and do a VR tour of it. And then the other cool thing, one cool thing that Horizons did with VR that was really neat, but it still needs, the kinks need to work out. And like you mentioned, and I don't know the answer to the back end stuff with like the bandwidth. That was the only problem I came across with Horizon with this. But have you seen any 360 live videos, like a basketball game or anything like that?
Yeah.
Horizon was doing some of that with and that stuff's all coming. I mean, 360 live streaming is actually, believe it or not that hard to do. It's really not that hard to do.
Wow.
Interesting. One thing that you spoke about, to call back to this, was something that I heard early in crypto, especially around like with what Epic Games does. So in college, for example, I used to play a lot of League of Legends, and I still have tokens in that game that basically they're stuck there. I'm not a gamer anymore. And one thing that I really would love to see is some of these in-game tokens being able to have currency on ramps and off ramps. And that's something that it'd be difficult to, it's kind of those pearls that are being clutched right now by the gaming companies. They don't want to all of a sudden open up those tokens to the game to kind of a blockchain on ramp, off ramp. And so I guess just what initiatives have you seen maybe in this space that are moving towards more of that being something that those types of companies would be willing to accept? And I guess what innovations are coming for that sort of thing in the game that you're developing, or other games you've seen being developed in the VR space? Because it seems like that's the one piece that, World of Warcraft, Fortnite, and as I mentioned, League of Legends, they all have their economies, but there's no real on or off ramp. It feels like sometimes if I put money into there, it's like I have to spend those tokens there, otherwise there's no way of me getting it back.
It's not even just the tokens too. It's like the whole game experience is all like its own ecosystem. And I feel like that's like what a lot of people are talking about with Web3 is this idea of interoperability and NFTs exchanging from game to game, and you can, kind of carry your identities around. But I don't know how much of that we're actually seeing as a reality yet.
I was actually in a Twitter space earlier today, representing Samurai Legends, and with a bunch of other Web3 games, and one of the topics was interoperability, and my take is that it's going to take a few very successful games before we start seeing the interoperability. Like there's no, who's going to agree to use my NFTs in their game, unless we were very successful, or, like Super Smash Bros. Isn't the first game you make, you make all the other games and then you take all those characters. So anyway, sorry, that was my take on this tangent, but no, Father Ian, if you want to talk about, especially because this is where you started your conversation, right? The in-game economies and how they're experimental. And I am also curious, sorry, we're throwing like 5 questions at you right now. As we're thinking about the in-game economy, I mean, how does it change from being an experimental versus like real effects if there are on and off ramps to it? I don't know your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways we can go. I mean, I don't know. I feel bad. Forgive me if this gets back to Tim Sweeney. That it was emails that I had like a year, 6 months, a year ago. But I actually talked with him in one email. By the way, these are not long emails; they're very short. And he just said very succinctly that his concern, because I asked him, well, like kind of would like a Fortnite use blockchain and things like that. And he's a little skeptical of blockchain when I talked to him. I have a feeling his thoughts have probably changed. But I mean, and I don't know him that well. But one thing he mentioned was with Fortnite was the difference between NFT speculation, which was millions of dollars, and his end goal, which was to create a good game for kids. And so I think the concern would be is that if you open up to free markets, then you start to get speculation and you start to get issues with inflation, which going back to the other issue, you get issues with wealth inequality, which happens in video games. I mean, poor kids don't have access to the same characters as the wealthy kids, and or other bad actors. I think the good thing to remember about Web 2.0, the one thing I am sometimes a little bit like cautious with Web 3.0 is I'm not much of a utopian guy. Like I don't think that crypto and Web 3.0 is going to solve all of humanity's problems. And that's one of the things when I was at the Catholic Crypto Conference talking with people who are in the crypto space and Web 3.0 that were more secular is they really had this high optimism. And I would equate it to the experience that we had with Web 2.0 with Napster. And I don't know if you remember, man, I was a freshman in college when Napster was all free. It was like my generation's Woodstock. Well, it was all file sharing. We were downloading, we were making hundreds of CDs, and I had like hundreds of versions of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and all these rare songs, and it was just a free for all on Napster for like a year or two.
That was like LimeWire for me in high school.
Yeah, and of course the regulations caught up with it. And I think the regulations are going to catch up with, which I know one of the things Carl, who works Crescente and Faith Games, he's done a lot with regulation with Web 2.0 and a lot of the technology when he worked with Bloomberg. And so I think establishing justice in these spaces, learning best practices, things like that, interoperability, I think. I mean, personally, we were talking about this with concerns that we had about creating NFTs and creating characters. Is I didn't want to see a non-NFT show up in Fortnite shooting everybody up, or like a Pope Francis, scissor kicking somebody, in a martial arts video game. We don't want that happening.
Yeah, some things in our faith, in our Catholic faith especially, do still deserve to be treated with that sacredness and reverence that they're due. And you wouldn't want to necessarily see that get perversed when we can do that. We can do that all by ourselves here in the open world, just fine. We don't need to try to do that in digital spaces, even though in a lot of situations it already is. So that's good to hear that the what do you call it, the there are some things that are trying to be preserved, and because the space isn't necessarily, I mean, we're finding more and more Christians and Catholics in the space through this podcast, through things like the Catholic Crypto Conference, but by banding together, we're able to kind of hold those vestiges that are important to the faith and being able to maintain that reverence and sacredness with which they deserve to be treated in the Web3 space, all the same, in the where our feet are actually on the ground simultaneously. So it's just another way to be able to evangelize that way and treat something different than everything else in the space. So I appreciate that aspect
Yeah,
personally.
and speaking of which, a good anecdotal of where that boundary is violated in kind of a fun way,
Yeah.
but it was hilarious. Remember when I mean, I never played World of Warcraft, but my buddies who
Me
game
neither.
was like, you got to watch this, where they crashed the funeral of so the person died and they held an in-game funeral for him, but they didn't put up defenses and they didn't have weapons at the funeral. So a competing tribe came in and just wiped them out in the middle of the funeral, like marauding. It's like a famous YouTube video, and they recorded the whole thing. They're on their horses coming in, and but I mean, we laugh about those things, but I mean, those are the kinds of things that could potentially happen with too much interoperability. You have your nice church setting in a Web 3.0 space, and somebody comes in and does something.
So I'm guessing there's no fighting in the Acutis game, or is there?
No. Yeah, no fighting. And when you wrap your mind around, also like looking at the Matterport and some of this stuff, is Web 3.0 will be used by businesses and things like that. I mean, the way you visit spaces now on Google Images or on using Google, you'll do. But also another thing, I don't know if you guys have looked at this at all, and I've kind of been thinking about this a lot lately, is animation. How I think that's gonna take off. Like there's gonna be like an Instagram version of animation. So like what Instagram did for photos, somebody's gonna do for animation. So you remember with Instagram, what they did was they made filters really able to, any teenager could use a filter. Whereas before, editing software was highly specialized.
Mm-hmm.
But with animation now, Unreal, just at the state of Unreal, they showed the ability to do animation, a phone face to animation pretty seamlessly. And it's still a little glitchy. It's not going to be super awesome, but it's getting close.
That's awesome. Have you seen any of those like AI generated like text to video? They're like super funny to watch. I like the Will Smith eating spaghetti or something, and it's just like the way it's generating every frame. Like it's not anyway. But you're right, it is coming. The fact that they're doing it poorly now means they're going to be doing it real well in a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested with MetaCatholic because you're kind of at like a first mover space here, both within the Christian community exploring the metaverse, but also just the metaverse broadly because it's so new. And like, what are the goals of MetaCatholic more broadly speaking? Like, is this game that they're developing, is it kind of like a first use case, like a demo? Kind of what are the longer term thoughts for what MetaCatholic partnering also with this other initiative? What is it, Faith Games? But where's this going, do you think?
Well, I think short term with Faith Games is to generate revenue for projects with the Carlos Acutis game, is to really push things in that direction. The model I would approach things with broadly with all the things I do with media that I've always done is there'll be like, where you spend 80% of your time, 70% of your time, which I think short-term video game, what we're finding right now is that Web 3.0 and VR is so new that people just don't understand it. Like, it's like, they just don't understand it. So with Web 3.0 and VR, we're not as much pushing that with the Carlos Acutis game because we're just trying to focus on the short term. But long term, that's where things are going. And the one thing I talked about very early on, often with Carl and Eddie when we were partnering together. The one mistake I see Catholic media makes is that they always are responding, and they're always 5 to 10 years behind the secular space. And what I really want to keep doing throughout my career, and I've done it before with Web 2.0, I mean, not with huge successes, but always be on the cutting edge of things. Maybe not directly where it's under the brand MetaCatholic, but that we have our hands in trying to be where that is. And because early on, like, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I can't remember how long ago now, I jumped onto TikTok before many Catholics were on TikTok, and I didn't recommend it. I didn't think it was a good place for people to be, but I figured as long as there's somebody there, let me throw up some content, and I try not to draw too much attention to it. But I think that there's just in our lifetime, I think we have to get used to every 5 to 10 years that there's a major disruption. And I think anybody who does media and even in the church world, you just have to expect a disruption. With campus ministry, I see it more clearly because I work with college students. College students are behind the curve, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. But between 18 to 23, it's like all they care about is their friends. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They care about their school, their grades, and their friends. They don't really stay up on technology. I remember I was explaining to college students what TikTok was, and they're like, "Oh, it's never going to take off. It's never going to be a thing." Yeah,
that's great.
I remember explaining
only took a pandemic, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember telling them about the song "Old Town Road" that was big on TikTok. I was like, "This is going to blow up," and they were like, "Who would listen to this song?"
That's hilarious.
And then 2 weeks later, they're all thumping to it. Old Town Road.
Gosh. Hey, yeah, tell us right now, what's going to be big next year? No, you're really good at predicting this.
Give us that crystal ball.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I actually, in terms of content, relationship content, I mean, I know there's the one guy who's controversial with it. I don't even know his name, where he just gets the crazy, the crazy promiscuous women on his show. Like the
whatever. Yeah.
It's either whatever or it's fresh and fit, both of them.
I mean but then I see clips for that. But then you see a lot of actually I've seen a rise in conservative dating values. Like there's this one guy on Twitter, that I think he could be big, where he's a grad student for dating stuff. I have to look up his handle. But all he does is he posts statistics on dating stuff and analysis of it from an objective standpoint. And I mean, I can tell you my students find it's like addictive content. They just love it. Because it's not opinion based. It's just, data. And he gives analysis of the data. So I could see some of like that kind of thing becoming bigger, which is funnier because I find the internet's not becoming like I'm sure that there's a lot of content that is just purely entertainment, cat videos, dog videos, but I'm finding a lot of intelligent content and micro content.
I think they're just improving their feeds, right? Like Twitter algorithm is so good that we only see the intelligent stuff, right? Like you asked earlier whether, I see people who say the dumbest things about Web3 or NFTs, and it's like, no, I don't. I think I only follow people who are really in the space, right? So it could be our little bubble here. But
I did mean more in person though. Like when I'm talking,
okay.
I get like the 90-year-old, the 70-year-old parishioner, and she's like, "Father, what is this you're doing?" And I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it.
I'm not gonna lie though, Father. There is something to that relationship-based content. My wife and I just watched that show, Farmer Wants a Wife, and it was just so obscurely captivating that these people would do this thing and go out in the middle of nowhere to essentially date these farmers, and it was obscurely riveting and just so weird. But I would agree with that based on some of the tendencies that I even go towards when I'm looking at content or things that I'm going to watch or consume. So I find that very interesting that you're drawing those parallels, because I have seen the whatever clips, and I find those I watched 1 or 2 episodes of the podcast just to see what the whole thing was like, and it is quite interesting. I think they had Michael Knowles on an episode, so that was pretty cool.
They had what's in the big pro-life Lila
Rose, yeah,
Lila Rose, yeah.
I saw the clip of her, and then afterwards I listened to Matt Fradd's podcast.
I listened to the Matt Fradd podcast.
Yeah, no, that would be awesome if Matt Fradd went on that show just to hear his take, and anybody with an Australian accent, like any day of the week, plays for easy listening. Like so, yeah.
Oh, by the way, I want to hold over Matt Fradd's head at Seek. He was talking junk on VR and Catholic VR before. He didn't really know about its MetaCatholic, but his son enjoyed our booth thoroughly.
Were you at Father? Were you
I did want to put him on the spot. I was like, I almost want to take a video of his son, like Matt Fradd's son, there and enjoying it with his friend. He's like,
we need to clip this and get it in Matt Fradd's feed.
Yeah, Matt Fradd, if you're listening to this right now, we want you on our podcast too.
Hey, were you at Seek, Father?
Yeah.
My wife works for Focus, so that's why I asked. So,
Yep.
Yeah. So that's funny.
What does she do for Focus?
I don't want to dox her here. We can talk off. We can
talk
after the episode. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, of course. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can talk. After the record button's off. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, man, if she asks around about me, I don't know what my reputation is. I think I'm like the wild man chaplain, because now I joke around. They send me all the wild guys, I think.
We'll talk after we hit the record button here. We might be in the same place in a couple of weeks. But anyway, so you went to the Catholic Crypto Conference kind of eyes wide open, like you were saying. I guess just how do you evaluate the space from a clerical position? Because this is something that I've been wondering myself, and I'm actually going to start asking some more of my priest friends. I have a lot of friends that are priests, and some are a little more apprehensive towards this kind of stuff. Some are like, it's interesting, but I don't know enough, and some are like, this could be the next great thing, in terms of like what could help people get in a better position than they are today. So I'm just curious your overall position on crypto, and I know the Crypto Catholic Conference skewed very heavy with Bitcoin, so I'd love to hear your position on just cryptocurrency, kind of a 30,000 foot view, and then Bitcoin specifically.
Yeah, I think first of all, in terms of clergy, the clerical world depends a little bit what kind of member of the clergy you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. Religious orders, particularly the Jesuits, Dominicans, Franciscans, they're a little bit more open to risk taking, but still not as much risk taking. Diocesan priests generally are not very known for being high risk takers.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So just in general, clergy are not risk takers. So the church adaptation of this is probably 10 to 15 years off at least. And it's really what's got to happen is it's got to go through some like early adapters like myself, Crescite, other people in the space, learning from mistakes. There being series of scandals, things bottoming out and then coming back up. And when it gets to the point where everybody's doing it, then I think the church as a whole will respond. One thing people forget about even the internet was up until about, I was in seminary and they were still debating banning clergy from using the internet altogether. That was still a conversation that was being had, and banning seminarians from being on any social media platform. Because I was on Facebook and I had to go off campus to check out my Facebook because we weren't allowed to look at social media on campus. And we could talk about a longer thing where sometimes media fasts are good, but it was a whole different world. The only reason why it changed was because Pope Benedict said we should be getting involved with the internet. And as soon as he wrote that document, everybody switched tunes and they said, we need to be involved with this. So there's probably going to be something similar with Web 3.0 until a Pope officially tells the formators, the bishops, hey guys, we need to be in this. That's probably going to be the hesitancy. With Bitcoin, what I think the big thing, I've talked about this a lot with Carl and Eddie. I believe that the cryptos that will survive, or the tokens, the Crescite, they don't call it a crypto, they call it a token. But the big thing I've come to believe working with Crescite is that the tokens that will survive, it's because you believe in the project. It has a very specific project that you believe in. I think simply having a crypto or a token just simply to have it like you'd have dollars, I don't think that's a long-term good strategy. But for example, with Crescite, the reason why I believe in it is they're dealing with cross-border transactions, and they're dealing with getting care to the poor, the marginalized, cross-border transactions, things within the church, assisting the church in her mission. So that's why I personally believe in Crescite. Now that being said, I did make a little bit of money off of crypto because I had a big donor. He said, "Look, I want you to do this for me." I was like, I don't normally my donors just tell me what to do with my own personal money, but okay, I'll do it. And I did, and I made a little bit of money. But with that, I think that most of the tokens and cryptos that will last will be tied with specific projects and specific things. Like, for example, a video game that you believe in, things like that.
So you don't think Bitcoin will last?
I don't know with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's like the Walmart it's like the biggest one.
I like your answer because it's like it's an untraditional one, and it's definite, but there's still some thought behind it, which is refreshing to hear some different perspectives.
Yeah. I think aren't a lot of also even some of the other tokens, they're tied with specific projects, like helping people with specific goals, things like that, right?
We hope so. Unfortunately, sometimes the vagueness is jarring, but when I look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, I guess even BNB a little bit, I see the origins of I see an ecosystem that they're supporting essentially, and because they are hosting this ecosystem, the things that can get built upon them and the potential it's kind of endless, but it depends on what I see is a bunch of projects get created, but then there's not a lot of follow through, and that's something where right now it's because there's a project gets started and then all of a sudden they run into an issue and they don't have the right person that has the time to help solve the problem. And I know, Matt, you can speak a lot more to this working on projects, but a lot of times I find that resources and time are often the shortcomings of a project that has a good idea up front, really blows up because of the idea. But then in terms of having people out there to do the grunt work, it sometimes feels like it's tough to find that follow through, especially when people are expecting to actually make ends meet out of doing this when there's not a lot there, because a lot of it is like working for a startup in a lot of capacities.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of an interesting point, right? You named, Bitcoin, Ethereum, even BNB, right? It's almost like, if everybody, when all these car companies started, the best bet was probably to, invest in a gas company, right? Because they were all using gas, right? But yeah, whether it's a thing you believe in or, you want to stick to general and the gas companies of the crypto world. But I
want to say that I think one point you made that I learned from is, I think when you made the point with Ethereum and Bitcoin, is that they've built a network that the network. So it's not just the token, but it's the network that you're buying into, which that makes sense for something that you could believe in, because there's all kinds of things that could be built on that.
Yeah, it's a kind of separate layer that people are building on top of. To bring things back just a little bit to AR VR. So obviously with MetaCatholic, like we've been saying, you're a first mover. You're creating the game as we're speaking, right? And but I'm curious, what's the vision? 5-10 years from now, how will the church interact with AR and VR? What do you have any thoughts?
I do. I just don't. That one I have to. I don't know if I can talk about as much. The guys are trying to. They're trying to rein me in from talking too much.
No, even if it's not MetaCatholic, but like in general.
Yeah, no. I mean, we have very specific ideas,
okay.
If you want to sign a mutual NDA, we can tell you about it privately. No, I don't know. I'm still learning about what I can talk about publicly and what I can't talk about. But I think Web 3.0, I think broadly conceived that we talked about the faith games and the Carlos Acutis becoming a metaverse type experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at a lot of possibilities for things that could be done. I mean, really at this point, the ideas, I mean, there's probably, I would say, in our bag of tricks, there's at least 20 to 30 really great ideas. It's just going to be imagine which ones emerge first. I think a lot of that will be depending on some of the emerging technology. It's just, but what I tell the crew with all the things we're doing is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So like if I was talking with an investor, if I was talking with somebody and they said, well, Father, we don't want to invest in this, or why should we invest in this? I'd say the difference between investing in faith games, MetaCatholic, is do you trust us that you want us leading the charge into the space, or do you want somebody else leading the charge? Because we saw it with Web 2.0. One of the things that there's a lot of people who jumped on Web 2.0 very early, and they dominated things in the Catholic world. When you're normally the first in the space, think the person who owns Catholic.com, which I think is Catholic Answers, right? So they jumped on that really quickly. And so what we're trying to do with MetaCatholic and faith games is jump into those spaces and be the first in them, so that we can shape it to be faithful to the Catholic Church and serve the mission of the Church. Also, I think it's inevitable. Really, when you start to really wrap your mind around it, you're like, this is inevitable. I think in 5 to 10 years, I think a good glimpse into what the future will look like is spatial. And I think spatial is an available technology. It's very limited in what it can do. But once you wrap your mind around it, with spatial, you can access the virtual spaces on your phone, I think maybe on your laptop, but at least on your phone and on a VR headset. So I could be hypothetically right now on my phone interacting with you as an avatar, and you have a headset on interacting with my avatar, and we hear each other.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty common. I think 360 live streams, maybe even where you're present virtually with some kind of avatar, maybe not visible to the people there. I think all these things will be in play. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think most of the technology, I think, kind of already exists in one way or another. It's just too astronomical or too complicated to put all together right now. Like you can do one-offs and you can do little different things with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's well put.
To take it back a little bit, maybe to I think the VR, the metaverse stuff is super interesting, and but even just like broadly, like in the crypto space, like looking at what it looks like to be a first mover, like I feel like everything in this space right now, if you're here now, you're a first mover, and it is a lot like the beginning of the Web 2, space. You had like all these browsers, right? You had Internet Explorer, you had Chrome, came much later, but one of the early ones was Netscape, and obviously that didn't that didn't really last. So we're going to see a lot of that. Not everything's going to last, but and so it's kind of like an interesting question to me. It's like, as Christians, if we're looking to develop in this space, like what's going to be the best play, broadly speaking, I guess, for the church? Is it to create our own technologies, be here, create these powerful faith communities? That's a good thing. Maybe another play would be, let's get involved in some of these things that are already going on, and be a major player in those spaces first. Or like, say, for example, like if Amazon was just starting up today, maybe the best play would have been not to create another Amazon that maybe would have been more aligned with our interests, but just to get involved in Amazon early and start influencing the space. So I feel like we probably need to do both, because we don't really know, what's going to pan out in the end. So we need to develop Christian spaces, but we also need to be involved in the secular spaces where the technology that we're all going to have to use is kind of getting built. So, I mean, we do need both. I don't know, like, what are your kind of thoughts on that? And I know we're kind of running out of time here, but it sounds like with MetaCatholic, obviously in the name and in faith games, like it is very focused on the church, this church space, and I think Crescite is as well, very much intending to be a Catholic, currency. Do you think there's benefit? Do we think we should just be pursuing that? Do you think there's maybe benefit to being involved in the broader space, or where do those kind of relationships form? Will impacting not just the church but the society at large?
Yeah, I think we can look at three things. So there's three questions, right? So build separate communities, separate our own technology, our own spaces. One, how do we impact existing structures or emerging structures that are not by definition faith-based, but more secular? And I wanted to make a third point, but the third question, but we'll just stick with those two for now. I think the how do we influence the secular culture? I think this gets at a broader question of the humanities and formation, where I would actually argue in the secular world, we are in a dark ages. What do I mean by this? So the period of the dark ages was not a period. So normally I think they say it's from like the year 600 to like 1000 or something like that, like
Yeah.
the 7th century. And the basic idea of the dark ages was technology was still advancing. European power was still advancing, but the knowledge of the antiquity and the humanities and philosophy and reason and law and some of these principles of civilization were being lost and being deteriorated because concepts like justice and virtue and truth did not have the strong foundation in the humanities. I think right now, the biggest thing we have to offer, like what I think is going to emerge in the next 10 to 20 years, is that in these companies, you can have a strong STEM degree. You can have a great background in statistics, coding, all the different STEM type things. But what we really found with COVID is if you're not formed in the humanities, you're not formed in virtue, you might not be just, which wreaks havoc on a workplace. You might not be temperate, which clouds the reason. And all these things affect and spill over. So I actually think in the secular spaces, Catholics and Christians are going to be sought after employees because they have this moral framework. I think we all like to pretend that if your employees are getting hammered every Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, and they're rolling in Monday after a weekend of debauchery, that doesn't affect your business or your bottom line. That's not true. That does affect your business and your bottom line. Like unvirtuous behavior clouds the reason, which then leads to bad decisions. I think, one of the things with the crypto space right now we're seeing a lot of people who don't have strong moral formation, a sense of truth, justice, honesty, and they're wreaking havoc on the tech world because they can't control their passions. They're not, they're not the master of their domain, if you will. Seinfeld joke. And yeah.
What you're saying there, it reminds me a lot of like what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, because there's videos of them out partying a couple weeks before they had their major crash, and it was a scene of debauchery. And I don't know if a lot of people recognize that, but what you're saying, that's something that's definitely resonated with me lately.
Yeah. And then in terms of so I actually think this was at the height of the Roman Empire. I think this is why they always were concerned about Christians and Catholics in the early church, was I think Christians rose to power quickly, even in a pagan society, because they were virtuous. I mean, that seems so simple, but you do need virtuous people in the workplace. And I was really struck by this. I was on a plane ride with an Orthodox Jewish woman, and she was talking about how she had one business partner once that was not a believer, and she wasn't exactly the most devout Jew in the world. And she was a very nice person, but for her main thing was business, and she'd gone to a Catholic university, but it wasn't like the most devout Orthodox Catholic university. But she said even a lukewarm Catholic university still has a pretty strict moral code by the world standards. And she was saying that when she first dealt with somebody who was not a Christian, not a Jew, that she had a lot of problems. She said, because he just didn't seem to understand the idea of sacrificing for the common good. Like, why should I go out of my way for somebody else when I'm not gaining anything from it? And those are the values in the workplace. And I think secular world I think the secular world is in the delusion that they can create these things from nothing, like with their curriculum. But really, in the Christian view, it's grounded in temperance, courage, the mastery of the passions, asceticism, denying yourself. So I just went off into my spiritual direction world. Sorry about that.
Hey, that was great. That was great. We love to plug. We can't only talk about tech on this thing, so we need to evangelize the tech industry, evangelize the builders out there. So, we are wrapping up. I don't know if we want to call that a great send off for us. So again, we really appreciate having you here. It's great to hear about what MetaCatholic's doing, what Faith Games is doing. Excited to play this Carlo Acutis game, and run around the metaverse and not fight people, but, pray with people in the metaverse. So, thanks again. So everybody listening, like, subscribe, comment, tell us, anything out there. Usually Brandon does the sign off. Brandon, sign us off.
Yeah, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you watching, listening wherever podcasts are found. As Matt was saying, please like, comment, review, subscribe. We appreciate it. We're just trying to grow this conversation between the Web3 world and Christianity. Join us for the conversation. Tell your friends about us, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Peace.